Let's turn now to another developing story right now. Billionaire and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein is locked up in a federal prison in New York City and is expected to be in court tomorrow after his arrest just yesterday. Law enforcement sources tell CNN Epstein has been indicted on new charges related to alleged sex crimes involving minors. They add the alleged crimes happened between 2002 and 2005 in both New York and Palm Beach, Florida. Now, Epstein was convicted of similar crimes in 2008, but he avoided a possible federal life sentence after cutting the deal of a lifetime with federal prosecutors. He only ended up serving 13 months in a county jail. And joining us now with more on this latest twist in really a blockbuster story here, editor-at-large for HuffPost, Vicki Ward. She's also the author of the bestsellers The Liar's Ball, The Devil's Casino, and most recently Kushner, Inc., an expose on Jared and Ivanka Kushner. Vicki, you've done a lot of reporting on Epstein. I know you've interviewed him and some of his alleged victims. What's your reaction to this arrest?
Well, finally tomorrow, maybe the wheels of justice will begin to turn, as they should have done many years ago for Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, this is an extraordinary story in that the sort of miscarriage of justice that played out for over a decade here kind of played out in plain sight. I have to give a shout out to Julie Brown at the Miami Herald, because it was really her three-part investigative series highlighting the appalling things that happened to Jeffrey Epstein's victims, that got Congress moving, that got 15 Democrats, that critically got Ben Sass, the Republican from Nebraska, to say to the Justice Department, wait a minute, what on earth happened here? Because it looks like you guys broke the law back in 2007 when you cut a plea deal with Jeffrey Epstein, giving him this cushy 13-month sentence in a county jail where he was free to walk around and go to work. And the FBI investigation, the federal investigation, was cut off, and none of the victims were told that this plea deal was going on. The plea deal was struck, importantly, by the current Labor Secretary, who was then the U.S. Attorney in Miami, Alexander Acosta. Interesting questions for him. He always said, well, he told sources of mine, well, I was told to leave Jeffrey Epstein alone. I was told Jeffrey Epstein was had something to do with intelligence. So I think, this is the beginning of the second chapter of this story. There are many questions about this man, why he was able to escape justice. But this is such an important milestone. What happens tomorrow?
Right, and we are expecting a hearing tomorrow, and we should know more about the allegations in the indictment when it's unsealed. I know you interviewed Epstein a number of times in the early 2000s, and you'd said he kind of creeped you out from the beginning. At that time, you were doing this deep dive of who he was, how he got his wealth. What were your interactions with him like?
So I found him incredibly creepy and threatening. I was pregnant at the time, and he didn't like the fact that I began to uncover that, a lot of the stories he had told the rich and famous in New York about himself was simply not true. And he would phone me, and at the end of the phone call, every time he talked to me, he would say, by the way, Vicki, this is off the record, and if I don't like this story, here's what's going to happen to your unborn children. That was the kind of tenor of this guy. And I have to say, the mystery around this man, still remains. It's still baffling to me how many of New York's sort of billionaires, the Wall Street crowd, Les Wexner of The Limited, what is the hold that Jeffrey Epstein has over them? When I reported my story for Vanity Fair, Jeffrey Epstein got into the offices got famously, it's sort of Condé Nast legend, got past security and went to see my then editor, the editor of the magazine, Graydon Carter. And they had a private discussion, at the end of which Graydon Carter decided to remove the on-the-record story that I had alleging that Jeffrey Epstein had sexually harassed two young women, two sisters. One of them was underage. And that was incredibly difficult for me then as a reporter. These women had been so brave to go on the record. I couldn't understand the leverage. How did Jeffrey Epstein, manage to negotiate that? And I think that these are the kind of questions that really now, I'm certainly going to be on in a major way. I've been following this for quite some time.
We know that one of those victims.
Connections.
We know one of the victims, Vicky, that is part of this new round, we understand, of allegations is one of the women, and at the time a young woman who you spoke to, whose story wasn't able to be told.
Right.
We know this is a man who had a lot of money. He has a lot of connections, very controlling. You experienced a taste of that, as you've explained in your reporting. In a 2018 piece for the Daily Beast, you wrote, "He has a way of spooking you, does Epstein, or he did. My babies were born prematurely, dangerously so. He'd ask which hospital I was giving birth at, and I was so afraid that somehow with all his connections to the academic and medical community that he was coming for my little ones, that I put security on them in the NICU." Vicky, how do you think his alleged victims are feeling today?
Well, I think, knowing the family, I think they will be feeling a mixture of empowered and afraid. I'll never forget the mother of these two women telling me that many years later she was afraid to walk the dog at night, afraid at who might jump out at her. This is a man who, even recently, I've been told, has been advising the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia with the bond issue of Aramco. So he is still mixing with influential and important people. So imagine how brave, the courage it's taken for these women to come forward and really hope that they get a fair and just hearing.
All right, Vicky Ward, we really appreciate your insight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anna.
New polls